We're here to talk about how to start a Fine Arts Academy in your church. We have an hour, so we can't get to everything that you can do in great detail, but this is kind of a Survey 101 course to talk about how to get started. I've had this idea, what do I do with it? What is a Fine Arts Academy? Those kind of things we'll talk about, and then we'll get into detail in some of the key areas. I serve currently at Austin Baptist Church. This is a fairly new church in the Austin area, just turned 8 years old this week, and I serve as Associate Pastor of Music and Worship. I've spent most of my ministry in Keller, Texas, which is on the north side of Fort Worth. I was at First Baptist Church, Keller, from 1991 to 2010, so 19 years there. And that's where I developed most of my thoughts and had most of my experience with Fine Arts Academies. But my story goes back earlier. I was serving in the middle of the state of Louisiana in a town called Pineville, as a twin city, Alexandria, separated by the Red River. Do we have a connection there?
Yes, we do. I was in First Church in Alexandria.
Okay, yeah. While serving a little church in Pineville, Louisiana, I came across, and I was new in ministry, came across a man in Alexandria at a church, Calvary Baptist Church, named Harry Thompson, and they had started a Fine Arts Academy in their church, and I didn't even know what that was. And I, being new, I wanted to learn all I could, so I went and spent 2 days sitting across the desk from Harry Thompson, and he told me all the things you need to know to start one, and what it does for your church, and what it is. So I owe a great deal to him, and I kind of kept those thoughts, and then when I got into a church where people were asking me weekly where their child could study piano, flute, guitar, violin, voice. Then I remembered back and pulled those files out, and in 1993 developed our Fine Arts Academy at First Baptist Church Keller. We had 19 students and teachers that first semester, and during my time there, the peak of it was around 2005, 2006. Over 350 students came into our doors to study multiple disciplines. Voice, piano, flute, guitar, violin, organ, art classes, drama classes, low brass, percussion. There's no end to what you can do in the area of the creative arts. And God has given us a great tool to use to reach people when oftentimes other traditional methods don't work or don't seem to work. And we saw times where kids would come and play in our worship services that not only had no affiliation with our church, but had no affiliation with our faith. And yet their parents came to sit in support of their child and endure a worship service to hear their kid play the postlude or something like that in a less formal setting. But it's a great outreach platform for your church. I'm going to kind of work off this PowerPoint presentation this morning, and it'll serve as a platform for us to discuss key issues. Fine Arts Academy is a ministry of the local church which provides excellent training in various creative arts disciplines to individuals of varying ages and levels of talent by qualified instructors. The Fine Arts Academy is financially self-supporting and is administrated by a coordinator. It's a ministry of the church. It's a ministry of the local church. It's a ministry of the local church. It's a ministry of the local church. Just like every other ministry within the four walls and outside of the four walls of your church. If you have a Sunday school ministry, if you have Awana ministry, if you have Upward ministry, if you have men's ministry, women's ministry, it is a ministry of the local church. You need to drive this idea into the hearts and heads of those you're trying to, quote unquote, convince to allow this organization to start in your church. It's not a business run from within your church. It is another ministry of your church. Okay? So there you go, just a definition. You can make your own. All right. Here's some of the things that the Fine Arts Academy does. Let's back up a little bit. If you go back to, let's go back 240 years, or 220 years to 1700. and you look at the leading topic of art in general, okay, and by the arts, let's speak in a broad sense, it could be sculpture, architecture, painting, music. The leading topic were religious themes. Those themes dominated all of art culture, not exclusively. The leading patrons of the arts were within the church. The church, from the church emerged. The greatest artists came from the church. Would you say that's true today? Doesn't seem to be, by and large, does it? In fact, we kind of tiptoe behind pop culture and see what they're doing and try to imitate, and I'm not here to make any comments about pop culture. I'm immersed in pop culture just like you are. I take from it, I use it. But the Fine Arts Academy, in my heart, at the root of why I would do this in a church, is to help return the church to its leadership role in the community, in the creative arts. I feel like Jesus said, you're the light of the world, the salt of the earth. You're to set the example. To me, if anybody has cause to make great music, it's those who make music about our Lord, right? If anybody has reason to make beautiful works of art to the glory of God, seems to me to be the most noble reason. And so to me, the church should be the leader. And the Fine Arts Academy can help you do that. Here are 4 things that it will do for you. Provides excellence in fine arts training. And I encourage you, as you develop these ideas and this program in your church or your community, to be sure and set a high standard of excellence in what you do. You know, hire qualified instructors, degreed instructors, so that you're setting yourself that excellent mark. If you're setting a low mark, then you're not really doing anything to raise the temperature in the community and in the world for art excellence in the church. Does that make sense? Okay, so you have to start with these high standards. And that is a relative term, obviously, depending on your community, the demographics, location. It assists in meeting the students' spiritual needs. And this is a great point. You're hiring instructors who are followers of Christ, and you want transference from the life of that instructor into the life of that child/adult. That's why your church is there, right? To make disciples of all nations. And so, now that at its worst would be the teacher and student spending an entire 30 minutes that the parent paid for a lesson having a Bible study. That's not what I'm talking about. And that's counterproductive to what you're trying to do in the bigger picture. I think you all probably understand that. But at the same time, when I think about people that influenced my life for Christ along the way, most of them were teachers. Were teachers that invested in me. I think about my first piano teacher, Miss Carlisle. We never spent time in the lesson talking specifically about spiritual matters. I was an 8-year-old kid. I mean, what was my understanding? But her life, her witness in front of me, the way she dealt with me, the way she treated all her kids the same and loved them all equally, was a tremendous witness and was a great building block for me to later know Christ. That's what I'm saying. Does that make sense? Although, in the lesson, if a kid has a question about a spiritual matter, the teacher should be ready and equipped in season and out of season to say, here's my understanding of what God's saying here. So it's a great way to assist in meeting student spiritual needs. Trains and develops future church music leaders. The picture you see up there is a little boy, church I was serving in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Parkview Baptist Church. I started the Fine Arts Academy there, and it has somewhat over around 50 students and a handful of instructors. Jay here has been both a student in Fine Arts Academies and is a teacher in Fine Arts Academy. He's also my son. We're glad he's here. In a few moments, we're going to let him share some perspective as a student and as a teacher. At this church where I served, there was a lady who served on the piano bench since she was 14 years old. The first time she played for a worship service, she was 14. She's now 70-ish, maybe 69. I looked at her every week and thought, where's the next her? Who's going to fill those massive shoes when she decides to step out? Where is it? And all of us need to realize we're all replaceable. Do you realize none of us are more than a couple of generations from complete obscurity? Tell me everything you know about your great-great-grandmother. You know what I'm saying? All of us will be forgotten, but if we're faithful in the role in which we're placed, we'll reach back behind us and bring along the next generation to celebrate Christ through the arts. I mean, I feel a strong and heavy burden to do that, and I hope you do too. If you're not thinking about the person who's going to take your place, then you have a very small understanding of the church with a capital C and what it means to perpetuate faith in Christ through the arts. Okay? So, you help bring along these future church music leaders in every way. The next great pianist, how many organ benches in our churches are empty because we failed in this way to train organists? How many of us are dying to have kids or adults who play strings in our orchestra programs? Well, in Keller, there's no string program in the public schools. Yet, if you go to First Baptist Keller right now, they have 12 to 15 violin students. That academy is the only strings program in the city of 50,000, 47,000 people. So you can be the leader in that. You can raise up. It was neat. How many of you were at the Park? You don't have to raise your hand. Were at the Park Cities concert last night. Did you know all but 3 of those people in the orchestra are volunteers? They had to fill in little holes with 3 players. Those are all people. Now, those people didn't just walk up and go, hey, I play the viola in a vacuum. They were taught somewhere by someone. Why should it not be in the walls of the church where we can influence all of those kids as they come up with a godly witness as they're learning to use the arts for the glory of God? As an outreach platform, Jay, kind of watch my time because I feel like I'm talking a lot. I don't mean to be. All right, this ends at 10:45. All right, acts as an outreach platform for the local church. Like I mentioned, at its best, the Academy will attract people from all over your community. While I was at Keller and at Parkview, I saw families join our church because the toehold into their life to build that relationship was through the arts. You've seen the same thing with sports ministry, things like Upward that I mentioned earlier, or other programs that you may have. Those are always entry points for people to relate to your church, and then you reach out and you build that relationship. They come to Christ, they join your church. God can work and move in their lives. The arts are a fantastic outreach platform. Any questions about these 4 things? Ready, set, go. There obviously are many more benefits to doing this. Those are 4 of the main ones, okay? All right, so here's some general ideas about getting started. The first thing is you need to, as the scripture says, count the cost. You need to know what's around you and know what the potential is before you begin to build something, right? You're going to survey your church and your community to find out if there's interest. If you're in a community where there are no children, this is going to be a hard thing for you to build in your church, right? So you need to find out. I remember putting an ad in our local town paper. At the time, our town was very small, had the Keller Citizen was the paper. And then I put things in our church publications to say, if you have a child, you'd be interested in having study piano or voice in the walls of our church, send me an email or talk to me or whatever. And you'll gauge how much interest there is and how much energy there is behind the idea, okay? And often that energy behind the idea will help bring it into life. So you need to do that survey work first. Hire a coordinator. The coordinator is the point person for your academy. For the first year at Keller, I was the coordinator myself. I received no additional pay for that. I just built it into part of what I do is make sure things run well. At the time, we had 6 teachers and 13 students, so all I had to do was connect those teachers to the students, come up with the right room at the right lesson time, and then boom, away we go. And every week was the same, and so it took care of itself. Then toward the end, you get the academy recital ready. At that time, 13 students, the academy recital lasted about 20 minutes because most of those students were playing hot cross buns or something in the last 10 seconds. So you need a coordinator. Now the coordinator needs to have 2 or 3 key traits. Number 1, they need to be excellent with people because they'll come in contact with all those you want to bring into your church through the arts. They're going to have personal contact with them. They're going to have contact with all your instructors. If you burn bridges with instructors that you invite to teach in your church, that community is small and word gets out very quickly, and quickly you'll become known as the Fine Arts Academy that makes their teachers mad for whatever reason. I don't know why my mind went that direction, but it's true. The coordinator also needs to have very keen organizational skills, because if your academy grows to 200 kids and you're teaching in a dozen rooms with 15 different instructors on 5 days, you can imagine what that looks like. I'll show you a picture of what a master schedule looks like. It can become tedious, and a person who drops details is not the kind of person you want, because then you end up with unsatisfied customers, so to speak, in that regard. They need to love God and love music, obviously, right? How are we going to influence kids for Christ through the arts if you have a person at the head who has no love for Christ and not a follower of Christ?
They can also be an instructor. The academy I'm at now, one of the instructors is also the coordinator. You say a lot of times a great person to look for is somebody who maybe had musical training when they were younger and now is looking for the homemaker, things like that, that have the time to come do this, because they won't get rich necessarily. But if they take it in addition to teaching their own students, they can make a little bit of money and be in a ministry at the same time.
Yeah, that's a good point. The coordinators I've had in the past had music degrees, raised a family, and then wanted to do something with that degree. And they go, well, I know something about music, or I know something about art. And then they stepped back into that world and had their own ministry doing that. Enlist qualified instructors, I think I covered that. Where do you find instructors? Right there in your church. You may have someone in your church right now who has a private piano studio who would be willing to transfer that studio to your church, teach from within the walls of your church. Boom, you have a Fine Arts Academy now. Now, if I'm a teacher teaching at home, why would I take my 10 students and come teach them at the church? Liability. Think of this. You're in your home and there's a kid there and they break your Vaseline plate. I don't know why I thought of that. Your Hummel or whatever you had. They break stuff. Who's going to pay for that? Your homeowner's insurance, but you're going to pay the deductible, and most of us have $500 or $1,000 deductible. You know what I mean? We had an instructor in our church, our Fine Arts Academy, a crippled man. He walked, he had hand crutches. He had his multi-$1,000 flute on his lap that was knocked off by a kid, and guess who paid for the repair of that flute? The church did, okay? Because we were liable for it. So there's protection for the teacher. Now, that's an extreme case, okay? But there's a protection for the teacher. Also, one of the biggest pains for a teacher with their students and their parents is collecting tuition, especially when parents fall behind and they've got to work through that while being the right kind of teacher for that kid, and it becomes difficult. In the Fine Arts Academy, we'll talk when we get to the money section about this, your teacher never handles money, never has to worry about tuition. In fact, if a student quits in the middle of the semester, the Fine Arts Academy is going to keep paying them, okay? Which they wouldn't have at their house. So there are reasons. Security is another reason. In the church, they're going to teach in a room that has a glass window on the door, and with other teachers nearby, and there's security in that. We'll talk more in detail about security. Determine the number of students that can be accommodated. That's going to be shaped. Your academy will be shaped by your building. Whatever rooms are available to teach in at whatever times, that's going to determine the capacity, right? If you have one room, 2 rooms that you can teach in, but you have a tuba teacher and a voice teacher, those can't happen at the same time, right? So you got to figure out how to coordinate that. But most of us have rooms in our church building that sit empty and dark 95% of the week. Why not capitalize on those rooms? They may have a piano. You don't have to have a piano room to teach a kid trumpet lessons or to teach a kid percussion. Or a room like this would be great for an art class. You know, if you have a large room in your church like that, you could do an Art 101 class and have 10 kids at tables, and we're learning how to do charcoal drawings. Why not use those dark and empty rooms for the glory of God during the week.
It doesn't take a large amount of rooms either. At the academy I'm at now, we have 3 rooms that we teach and we have over 50 kids a week. So you can make it work if you schedule it correctly, that you don't have to have 100 rooms refurbished. We fit 50 into just 3 and it can be done.
So, there you go. Develop a brochure and other advertising tools. I'll let you look at what some of those are like. This is a good time for me to say, all of this information is in this book, How to Start a Fine Arts Academy in Your Church. The most valuable part of this book is this CD that has editable documents like policies and procedure manual that's gone through a 20-year process is in here. They've thought about all the stuff you need. The enrollment agreement that the student and the teacher sign, the student and the church signs to say, here's what you can expect from us, here's what we can expect from you. That's in there. There are 46 documents in here that are very useful. This is available at the Pine Lake store. They're down to just a couple. You can also get them directly from me, parkerpublicationsonline.com.
I have that, and it's outstanding.
Good.
We're looking at starting this, and we got that first. It's amazing, the information we got right up front.
Yep. And it's not exhaustive. You're not going to find in here the answers to everything you're going to run into in your academy. That's why it's called How to Start. So I want you to know I'm always available to answer questions. I field questions almost every week from a church somewhere in our country about this. So I'm always available to help because someone helped me. Were it not for a guy like Harry Thompson spending 2 days with me to learn about it, I'm not standing here. So it's part of that reaching back thing, right? Yes, ma'am. I thought, no, go ahead.
Before you move your screen, you may be going to cover this elsewhere, but with enlisting qualified instructors, what's your feeling about hiring instructors that are not Christians?
You know, it's a sticky thing, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't not hire someone legally by their faith or not faith, but you can ask the right questions to find out where they are in their faith. And isn't it such an odd day? Go ahead.
We have a small fine arts academy. Use your book, and we did, and she's one of our best instructors.
Well,
And it could be a ministry to that person as well,
Yeah.
to be around all the other
I mean,
teachers.
we use some instrumentalists, at Christmas and otherwise that are
Right.
online, and I know the benefits, and I just wonder
Sure.
what your feeling was about that.
And it depends on your situation. You've got to
Right.
find out what works best. One of the things on that CD is a list of questions to ask when you're hiring. And it never directly says, are you a Christian? But it asks questions that lead the respondent to tell you where they are. And you've got to decide as a church if that's something you're willing to do. It kind of goes against what the thing is about. But I've also used people in my band at Parkview. I had people who were not believers, but I had them in church every Sunday because they were playing the guitar. And so I could influence them. There's not a cut and dried black and white answer to that. I think each person needs to, yes, sir.
I think one of the interesting things, in my career, I'm what's called a musician contractor. I work with 1,000 musicians. I've owned a school of music of over 300, and I am the orchestra director at Park Cities.
Oh, gotcha. Was I right with what I said, that only 3
We were
players?
close. We were
Okay.
very, very close. And we actually had 7 on stage. 3 were there because we couldn't bring 3 with us.
I
So
see.
it was just a matter of filling in. So we're really close. But the thing is that I think when you're dealing with the church and you have a need, now if you were talking about a pastor,
Right,
you can't ask someone to exercise a faith they don't have.
right.
But teaching trumpet is a different ballgame. So you can lay out a sheet of paper in there that says, here is what is expected of the teacher's behavior, and that goes all the way from sexual harassment, all the way through the process of professionalism and attire, language,
Substance.
Yes,
smoking.
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, all these little things. But are you asking your teachers to exercise faith? For example, are you asking them to lead the lesson in prayer at the beginning or end of each lesson? You can't do that, in this case here, if they don't have faith. And if you do not have someone who can fill that position and you need it, well, God very well may be doing some kind of an outreach.
Yeah.
but you can't exercise a faith they don't have.
Um,
Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's very helpful. I think each case you're going to have to make those kind of decisions. But like you said, be sensitive to the Spirit of God and how He might be leading you to lead that person to Christ too. There's another thought I had that I was going to share then about what you just said, but I can't remember, so we're going to go on. Good. Oh yeah, where do you find qualified instructors? From within your church. I kind of chased a rabbit there. Colleges, universities, seminaries, your community, they're there. They are there. We were 30 minutes from Southwestern Seminary, and we had several instructors come teach from Southwestern Seminary when I was in Keller.
UNT and other local colleges.
When in Baton Rouge, the instructors we
A lot
found,
of LSU.
LSU was a good resource. So look around you, and they're there. Okay, let's move on. I already said this first thing, finding rooms, it would take the shape of it. Where do we start? My Fine Arts Academies have always been concurrent with the school year of the predominant ISD around me. I know this can be a sticky wicket, especially if you live in a metropolitan area that people from 5 different ISDs attend your church. But in general, we try to start a week after school started and end a week before school ends, so that we don't run into final exams, the pains of starting 3rd grade, and all that kind of stuff. Typically, about a 15-week semester is the way we do it. We do a fall semester, a spring semester that goes mid-January to mid-May, and then a summer flex schedule whereby parents can choose an option of a certain number of lessons to teach for their kid to take, and the teacher and the kid coordinate when those lessons are offered. It's not like during the semester where it's every week at this time. 4 o'clock, you have your tuba lesson every Tuesday. During the summer, there's a little more flexibility to accommodate people and at the same time keep their kid studying. Is this a business inside another business? No, it's not. It is a ministry of your church. It's a ministry of your church. And your financial people will be very happy with how the finances work. We'll get into that in more detail. I know I keep saying that, but I'm really done. All right. Convincing the leadership. Go back to those 4 main benefits of doing this in your church, and that I think are the main selling points. Stories. So many kids have come through, have gone on to major in music, are now worship leaders in churches. I can give you stories. During its existence, the Fine Arts Academy at First Baptist Keller, I'm trying to think, has had well over 1,000 students come through it. And even if that student who studied piano for 3 years in the academy just ends up in the pew and is able to pick up a hymnal and read the alto line, you've done something to help the arts in our faith in a general sense, right? Okay. The FAA is worse than its best. Forget that for now. How much money do we need to get started? Great. That's a good question. Glad you asked. In addition to tuition, and it took me 10 years to begin doing this, and it was one of those aha moments. A semester or an annual registration fee is the seed money you use to get the thing started. At Parkview, what are they doing, $25 a semester or a year?
35 a semester.
35 a semester. So a nominal fee that goes with the application, $25, and so if you have 10 students, there's $250 to help have a logo designed and start. But you can literally say, hey, will you come teach 8 piano students next week, start next week? And you have a Fine Arts Academy. You've begun the process. So my encouragement in convincing your leadership is to try to get a spot where you can get started. Now I can tell you this, the church where I serve, I've been there 1 year and 3 months. I've had 2 false starts with the Fine Arts Academy. And our church is full of kids. And I get questions all the time, hey, where can my kids study piano? And I just go, we're not quite there. But it's this area of convincing the leadership, and I'm not putting my finger on a specific person, but the leadership in general, why this is a good idea for our church to take on. So, that's where you got to do a lot of work and have lots of conversations and try to make advances every time you converse about it, get a little further down the road with it. And if they say no to the idea as a whole, then say, well, can I just have Susie teach 4 piano lessons during the next semester, and we try it out and see how it goes. Then you've started. And then,
And you technically need no money to start. I mean,
Right.
you could, if you've got a room that it doesn't need to be refurbished at all, you can just start teaching. You know, that, how much money do we need to get this started? You don't have to pay the instructors ahead of time. They get a weekly check just like anybody else would, and so you started. It's self-sufficient financially.
okay, I think we've answered why in the world would we do this. All right, let's talk about money. Let's talk about money. You have four basic areas of where the money goes. Where does our money go? The teacher gets 80% of the money coming in. The coordinator gets 10%. So the coordinator's pay is commensurate with the size of the academy, which is commensurate with how much work they have to do. Right? An academy with 10 kids requires very little work. The coordinator makes very little money. An academy with 300 kids requires a great deal more work, and the coordinator hence gets paid more. You're going to find this basically falls, and then FICA and other expenses you have related to employing people, and then miscellaneous expenses. This is things to operate your academy: postage, printing, publicity, recital expenses, security, etc., and all that junk. It's going to basically fall along the 80-10-10 line. Okay, 80-10-10. 80 for the teacher, 10 for the coordinator, 10 for the other stuff. Okay, now we'll get into that a little more. All right, here we go. Hypothetically, let's look at one student for one semester. Let's say, hypothetically, the semester has 15 lessons, and we charge $25 per lesson. It would cost little Jimmy $375 to study piano for one semester in your academy at that level. Now, what we do is I've always offered monthly payment options. So August, September, October, November, and you could go December, and let them make 5 payments of what, $70 each? Now, when you do this, if you do this, because I wouldn't be able to write a $375 check up front when my kids were 8, 11, and 12 or whatever, it's a great option, but you need to remind the parents that it is not a monthly payment. In other words, they may be paying $70 in a month where their kid gets one lesson, depending on how the schedule falls. For instance, December. If your recital is December 13th, they may have one lesson and be paying you $70. You need to let them know up front, this is not a monthly payment. We're dividing the semester tuition into 4 payments, 5 payments, 3 payments. And that's, I've run into hiccups along the way with that, with a parent going, why am I paying $70 when my kid only had 2 lessons this month? I said, because you paid $70 and your kid had 5 lessons last month, and it's for the semester. It's $25 per lesson, over 15 lessons for the semester. Okay?
It's a deferment.
It's a deferment. That's exactly what it is. Okay, so there you see the 80-10-10. And I've got to confess, it's not a hard and fast thing. I think at Parkview, the teacher gets 85%. Is that?
Something like that. I don't know.
Okay.
It's changed.
So you may tweak that based on your own. And you need to decide what the going rate in the area is, and try to not be the most expensive and not be the least expensive, but hit somewhere middle, upper middle-ish, so that if it's the most expensive, you're going to become exclusive, and you won't have anybody come take. If it's the least expensive, you're going to devalue what you're offering, and people can go, well, that's where you go to get cheap lessons. So in my mind, at least in my way of thinking, you want to come in somewhere around the middle, and the 2 that I've built have tried to land somewhere in the middle of what local teachers are teaching for lessons. And that's certainly different in your area, depending on the demography and all that junk. Okay, there you go, a visual image of the revenue distribution. All right, let me go back here because I want to pause for a second. I wrote a couple of things down that I want to make sure it's safe this time. All right, questions about money. So when a person applies to be in the Fine Arts Academy, there's a sheet they fill out, their name, kid's name, where they live, email address, cell phone number, all that basic stuff. What lesson does Jimmy want to, or what instrument does Jimmy want to study? Circle 1. Trumpet, flute, guitar, they're all listed. What day of the week does Jimmy prefer his lesson? First choice, second choice, third choice. What time would Jimmy prefer? First choice, second choice, third choice. That begins to narrow it down so that the coordinator can connect the teacher with the student. Say you're gonna teach 10 students, I'm the coordinator. I find 10 guitar students. I give all those times, dates to him and matching them up with his schedule, and then he's got the contact and he makes the next contact. And with the registration form, they give you the registration fee, and then you move on and you're going down the line. We're gonna look at some documents in a minute. What's the time looking like?
A little over half.
Oh, wow, I gotta sit through this. Let's talk about security. My policy has been lessons are never taught in a room that has no glass on the door. So this room would not be a great teaching room for that reason if that's your approach. Parents are encouraged and always welcome to attend private lessons with their kids, especially if the kid's younger, because this will help the parent know how to help the kid practice, right? How many times have you tried to teach a 6-year-old, teach their parent how they should be practicing? Well, if the parent's in there with them, then they know, oh, that's what you said to her, not what she reported you said, you know, and then you avoid that communication breakdown there. Yes, sir.
The flip side of that, though, I've experienced is that having the parent in there sometimes makes the kid kind of show off and be distracted a little bit more. So one of the things,
Or
I've
even
done-
nervous.
Right. So one of the things I've done is because what I try to do is just do an open door policy. So then I have chairs sitting outside the door.
Parents
so
right around
parents
the
can
corner
still
reading a
hear-
magazine. Yeah.
Exactly. So they can still hear what's going on, hear what's being said, and then it's not that distraction, that nervousness. No.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. Areas where parents can sit together and actually make connections can be a great way to build bridges into their lives to bring them into the faith and into your church. You were gonna add something?
No?
Okay. All right, good.
Talk about making expectations clear with the policies and procedures,
Okay.
the agreement the parents
One more
sign.
security thing. We developed these tags, plastic tags. There's a little machine that you put the tag in and it'll print on them. First Baptist Keller Fine Arts Academy. And this was a tag that went on the kid's book bag, like your bag, so that when they're in the building, facilities people knew, staff knew, depending on the size of your church, you know, this is more of an issue or may not be. But they knew, and the kid also knew, hey, this is my Fine Arts Academy bag. It identified the kid, let you know they're supposed to be in my building, that kind of thing. So that's a really inexpensive thing to do.
You can also do that for instructors if you're, for instance, we're associated with a school. Our church owns a private school. So when we go to pick up kids, a lot of the instructors have to wear a badge so that they know this person's okay. If you've got a daycare or a preschool at your church that an instructor's got to go pick up a kid from to do their lesson.
A lot of these lessons are going to be taught after main hours of church operation, 7 o'clock on Tuesday evening. I think it's a good idea, if you're able to do this, to lock the perimeter of your church and have the instructor meet the parent at the door, open the door, let them in, door shuts behind them, teach a lesson, come back, get the next kid, drop off that kid. So that your building is not unsecure and you don't have people wandering in and out. You don't know who's in the building. There's a lot of concern about that kind of thing. What was it you said I was supposed to talk about?
The agreement the parents have to sign.
Oh, yeah.
How that helps the teacher.
Yeah, this enrollment agreement, this is another reason that an instructor would bring their studio into your church. This enrollment agreement ensures that boundaries and lines are drawn clearly up front. It says things like, what you can expect from us is that we'll offer lessons to your student every week at this time for 30 minutes or 45 minutes. We'll talk about that option later. You can expect the teacher to be here every week. If something happens and the instructor can't make it to the lesson for whatever reason, all those lessons will be made up. You, on the other hand, you're promising to come to the lessons each week. If your child doesn't make it for whatever reason, one of those lessons per semester will be made up. And you can see the potential problem for the mom calling, oh, we just can't make it today, and then it's a mess. So I've always had a one lesson makeup policy per semester. You can do all that on a Saturday, or you can do it on a double lesson kind of thing. There's lots of ways to accomplish that.
Now, if the instructor misses, they make up the ones
All
they
the
miss.
instructor lesson miss or make. And it happens. You know, an instructor calls one time and says, I just got in a car accident. I'm supposed to teach 8 students. I'm supposed to be there in 20 minutes. Then you put a sign on the door and go, Billy won't be teaching today because he or she was in the car. And then those are all made up somewhere at some point during the semester.
I'll say that to me, as somebody that's taught both in the academy and outside, is the biggest benefit of having the structure behind you, because if you teach a kid in a non-formal, they pay by lesson type thing in a home or something like that, almost always 6 months down the line, it's, well, we're gonna be out of town I had a kid, we're gonna be out of town 3 weeks in Italy, we'll call you when we get back.
And so the teacher doesn't get paid.
Yeah, teacher doesn't get paid. With the academy, you can attract quality instructors by saying, listen, you're gonna get a consistent paycheck, because these people have signed an agreement that says if we start not showing up, we still are on the hook to pay. It's really good.
And they commit for the whole semester. Now, there have been cases where a parent said, we're mad, we don't want to be involved anymore, we're getting out of here and you're not getting any more money from us. And we go, okay, and we let them go. And the academy absorbs the cost of that lost income and pays the teacher for the rest of the semester for that student. That's happened like twice in 20 years in my experience. Most of the time the parent realizes up front when you sit across the desk from them and go, now this is a semester commitment, you're on the hook for this $375 or whatever it costs per semester. They sign that, they date it, you keep it, and if it ever has to come up again, you have it and go, don't you remember signing this? So there's that. All right. All right, I'm gonna zip through this next part here. Security.
17.
Man. All right, there's keys to success. Do we need to say anything about any of that? Recitals. Why are recitals important at the end of the semester? This is where healthy competition happens. When a 6-year-old student who's just started studying, and a 10-year-old student playing who studied 3 or 4 years, then they go, I could be that good, and they admire that person. That, or even if they just hear the person who's a little further along from them than them, they can say, that's me next year. It's good for the parent to know the kid's making progress. Here's another thing that's on the CD, and I just thought of this because I need to make sure to mention it. One of the documents on there is a weekly lesson sheet. We'll look at it in a minute. This tracks the progress of the student for the entire semester. There are boxes at the top where you check off date and time that they attended a lesson. There's a place to list repertoire, that the parent can look at this and go, okay, here's what's happening.
And we backlog them, spring 2015, fall 2015, and keep several on file that you can look back and go, this is what we did. And if there's ever a question about, did we have a lesson on this date, you go, yes, here, this is where we checked it off. This is where you missed your lesson for what reason, and it's kind of just helps your...
Salt of the earth, light of the world, I already said that, right? You can offer lessons in just about any discipline you want. Photography, piano, voice, flute, guitar. All right, let me show you a couple of things that I think you'll want to see. Let me do this. Wake up. All right, while that's waking up, here's something that Tallowood put together that I think is brilliant about their Fine Arts Academy. Let me back it up here. Search online and find a number of churches across the country of different expressions of faith who have done things in this area. And I think that little welcome video is a great idea. I'm gonna do one myself. I'm gonna show you a couple of documents that I think will help you. Master CD. There we go. All right, the interest survey's on there, registration form. Here's kind of a generic registration form, as you can see. Again, these are all on here as PDFs and as editable Word documents or Publisher or other common software. You see it says just basic information, their name, address, all that stuff. I put 3 to a page on that little deal.
Oh, do you want to talk about while you're on enrollment, what you do with siblings?
Yeah, first kid pays a certain rate, siblings pay a reduced rate.
And the extra expenses portion of that 80-10-10 helps defer some of that cost, so the instructor still gets paid the same. But it's a good way to get families that might have, I mean, we had one family parking 13 kids
Oh.
as their
Yep.
family.
Yeah.
13
Wow.
kids, so what do you
Imagine
do with
paying for
that?
those. They were selling kidneys all over the place. Here's the enrollment agreement. As part of this agreement, the church is going to provide excellence training, begin lessons and classes promptly, strive for open communication. As part of the agreement, here's what you're going to do. Be prepared, be prompt, follow the makeup lesson policy, be prompt. I said that twice. Commit to studying for the entire semester, and here's where they sign. You can edit it and make your own version of that, right?
Should be a little weekly.
No, I will in a second. Here's the an academy brochure. You can't really read that, can you? If I press this magic button, it gets bigger. Now you can read it. Stuff on there about tuition, you can see this is a trifold document, by the way, or bifold. It's in 3 panels, 3-panel, 2-fold. List the instructors, their degrees. You may have an instrument policy, enrollment policy, the goals and philosophy, how to schedule it, what the makeup policy is. The recitals, this little panel on the far right is your best deal. It shows the key dates for the semester, for both the fall and the spring.
It's great if you've got a open house for a school or something like that. They're just going to hand somebody something super quick. It's got an overview of everything they need to know.
And then there's the summer registration deadline, all that kind of stuff you want in there. Here's what a master teaching schedule looks like. Boom, looks like tininess. So it'll have the room that's being taught in, the day, the time, and you just fill in the students' names. You'll want your church staff to have this master document, your facilities people, your administrative staff, ministerial staff, so that they know at any given time, they can look and go, oh, I'm supposed to go tell Jimmy that his teacher's going to be a couple minutes late. They know where to go to find. And also for scheduling purposes, to know what rooms are available when. Most of the time, you'll have no conflict. You can see all these people are named student. I'm not sure why that is. But there you go, Monday, and you can make your own little Excel spreadsheet, right?
Generally, I guess you're having most kids after school, if they're homeschooled, maybe.
Homeschool's
during
exception to that, and you can do a lot in the homeschool area with
Well-
group lessons. Go ahead.
And we, with our private school, can work with them to pull them out during different
During the
times.
schedule.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, we have teachers teaching all day. Depends, like you said, if you've got a preschool, for instance, you got beginner piano kids at your
Right.
church, you can pull them out of the preschool time. Parent doesn't even have to worry about transportation if they're already in the middle of something.
Okay,
like
here's
that.
your little academy lesson log or roll sheet. See, it says the lesson date, so you can fill in when they attended, if there's a missed lesson, when it was made up, the reason, all that stuff. List of repertoire, what they're playing on the recital, comments. It's a great way to leave a physical record of what's happening each week in the lesson. It's useful to the parent, it's useful to the student, it's useful to the instructor. It's almost like a win-win-win. Stephen Covey would be very proud. Okay, here is something that will mess up your brain if you're not the financial person. It's just a typical worksheet. This academy was in any town, USA, it looks like. All right, so during the semester, there were 352 and a half private lessons taught. A half because at Keller we were offering 45-minute lessons and hour lessons, so you end up with odd numbers, right? A 16-week semester, so that equaled 5,640 lessons, which brought in that much tuition. And you can do the math to figure out how much it was per lesson. The class lessons at the time, doesn't look like we're teaching any class lessons. Private classes. All right, there you go. The private teachers were making 78,960. The coordinator was making 10,000, and we retained the rest. Now, what did we do with the rest? We paid FICA, and then we bought pianos for the church. At its peak, every semester we were buying the church a new piano for a classroom because there was that much surplus. And being a nonprofit organization, the goal is not to make money with this. The goal is to dispense money, is to perpetuate, put it back into the program. That's one thing back to selling it to the powers that be, letting them know, hey, this has potential for capital improvements for our church in the area of the creative arts. We can keep our organ tuned well with extra money we get from this. We can buy new piano, we can buy more music stands for our orchestra, we can buy new handbell tables one semester, or that next octave of bells through surplus monies brought in through the Fine Arts Academy. All right, there you go. Teacher one taught that many lessons and made that much money, and so forth, all those people. I think the math is actually right on all this somehow. And then down there at the bottom, you can see the payroll periods. Of course, this fits in with exactly what your church is doing already financially. As was mentioned, all your instructors are signing all the documents that every employee of the church signs. I've treated them both as 1099 contract employees and as W-2 regular employees. It just depends on your structure and what the preference is there. If you don't know what those are, then you should ask your financial person. Question?
Well, we started Music Academy this past year, and what in talking with our church financial person and other leadership, the decision was to, instead of going through having the parents pay the church and that being dispersed to the teachers, having them pay the teachers themselves. But then what we did is each semester did a $25 registration semester fee to the church to cover, lights and expenses.
Gotcha.
And that.
Okay.
That seemed to work pretty well, just because, we started off with myself and 3 other teachers, so that it wasn't, it was a very simple start. And we didn't really want to make the others, employees, contractors for the church, and have to deal with all the headache of that. So that is.
And there are plenty of ways to do it, right?
Yeah.
I would just say, make sure in the minds of the people, as your congregation understands this, that they view it as a ministry of the church,
Right.
and as not as a business run from within a business, because you can potentially get into a really, not a gray area, more a cloudy, stormy gray area, when you talk about running a not-for-profit business inside of another not-for-profit business. And for instance, your Sunday school teachers, do they have to pay to keep the lights on in the church? Of course not. Do the RAs, GAs, Awana, Upward, any of those ministries, do they pay electricity to keep the lights on? Of course not. They're ministries of the church. This also needs to be viewed as a ministry. But you need to fit within the structure of what's there, be flexible, and be ready to do it one of several different ways, because there's not just one way to do it. All right, other questions for the last few minutes? Yes, sir.
Well, just a comment, and you talked primarily about the children and the students being children and so forth. But in our case, and I'm sure in cases that you've experienced as well, it really can be intergenerational.
Absolutely.
And in our specific case, it helps my wife fulfill a lifelong dream of learning how to play the harp. And now she is
Isn't that neat?
an amazing harp player.
Have you, a great idea we had the other day was Mommy and Me
Yes.
lessons. Think about, this beginning 4-year-old piano student and her mom taking piano at the same time, and the instructor could teach them both. You'll have to work out how the money on that works out, but there's no end to how you can do it and how you can use the arts. Side note, group lesson rates are not the same as private lesson rates. Group lesson rate, and they can't be, because number one, the student's not getting one-on-one attention. And if you were paying the same rate for me to teach group lessons as you were for me to teach private lessons, guess what I want to do? Okay, would I rather teach one kid at $60 an hour or 10 kids at $600 an hour? So you can't do that. You'll create mutiny amongst your fine arts faculty. So you've got to decide, there's instruction in there about how to do that, but you need to find what that number is that pays them for their work, but also doesn't let them become very wealthy by only teaching group stuff. All right, other questions?
I think you need to be cautious and careful. I would highly encourage them to become employees. just simply, I have owned a school of over 300, and the difference here is that this is within the church. But at the same time, with the new administration we've seen over the last 7 years, the rope is tightening from the federal level. Is that if you are assigning lesson times, if you're providing space, we don't pay our Sunday school teachers or our RA teachers,
Right.
but we are paying these guys.
Right.
You know, they are receiving income. So the whole concept of a business within a business or a nonprofit within a nonprofit, the weirder part of it is when it is a nonprofit entity and there is profit being made, and that is what the private teacher makes. So all that to say, you've got to talk to a CPA.
Yeah, you do. The private teacher's not making profit. They're being paid salary, just like anybody in your church is being paid
Correct.
salary to preach. But that's a good point, and whatever structure you're working within your church you do. If you have a preschool in your church, this would be set up exactly as your preschool would be set up from a financial standpoint. So if that's the case, you find out how that's working and set this up exactly the same.
And that is exactly where we are with it. And I think another side benefit then for the teacher is that the church, or the academy, through the church is paying the FICA.
Right, they don't have to take
And they
that
don't
out
have to,
themselves.
that's right. And that's a benefit.
You know, I know a lot of private teachers make a decision, some, I don't know, I'm just stabbing in the dark. They make a decision not to report that as income. That's between them and the government and the good Lord. But wouldn't it be nice for them not to ever have to worry about that again? And if nothing else, in their own heart and mind, that this is being done for you, and the church pays the 0.765%, and the other is taken out of their check, and it's sent off and taken care of. They just don't have to worry about it. Other questions?
I'll back right up on it. 1 minute.
1 minute? Yes, we did it! Hey, just want you to know that I'm available to help you any way I can. This is a lifelong passion for me, and I think the arts are just such a fantastic way to reach people for Christ. They make a terrible God themselves, but they're a great vehicle to get people to God. And we're created because He's created. I don't need to preach that sermon to you, you know that. God bless you, and let me know how I can help, okay? Have a good day.